Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, all you porcupines, you. Welcome to episode 84 of the Porcupine Report. I am, as always, your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the New Hampshire Free State Project, where we are building the freest state in the world by uniting and concentrating liberty lovers of all stripes, those who believe that the maximum role of government should be no more than protecting life, liberty, and property. You know what the Declaration of Independence says. It was once the mission statement of this country, but a lot of seem to have forgotten it in the modern age. Well, not in New Hampshire. Liberty lovers all around the country have been concentrating here for 20 years, and I'm so pleased to come to you today to talk with, we're going to be talking with one of the earliest movers for the Free State Project about a number of different topics. But before we get there, there's a little bit of business to get out of the way. Of course, I want to tell you, as always, about our wonderful sponsor, which is, of course, Porcupine Coffee Roasting. I believe that's a good cup of coffee myself. Porcupine Coffee Roasting is, it's not just coffee. It is a revolution in your mug, proudly operated by Free Staters in the Free State. They roast only specialty grade beans from small producers, always fresh, roasted in small batches to order with a roast date you can trust. Porcupine Coffee Roasting is a private membership association that embodies the live free or die ethic. They give freedom-minded folks like you a way to choose liberty with every sip. It's crafted for the caffeinated and the freedom-loving, perfect for those who want that free state spirit energizing them as they go on their day. When you drink Porcupine Coffee, you're supporting a small independent PMA powered by Free Staters who are dedicated to living free. And I've got a deal for you. Use code PORKREPORT at porcupinecoffeeroasting.com and you will get 15% off your order of individual products. And plus a portion of your purchase will go to support this very program. So it's a win-win-win, a win for you, getting great coffee, a win for the business. You're supporting some Free Staters being entrepreneurial, and it's a win for the show. It helps us stay bringing you a new episode every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. So you're going to drink coffee anyway. Why not drink a coffee with a Free State spirit? So grab your fresh roasted coffee and support liberty one cup at a time. That's porcupinecoffeeroasting.com and use Pork Report for 15% off your individual orders. Live free, drink free, stay caffeinated, my friends. All right. Thank you to our sponsor. This was a really great weekend we're just coming off of in the Free State. We had, of course, I've been telling you about it for weeks. We had Fall Fest in the Free State. Of course, fall continues for quite some time. This, of course, is the only state in New England where you can enjoy autumn without communism, freedom, the fall foliage without any of the fascism. So those who came up for Fall Fest, thank you for joining us. I managed to get out myself for apple picking and axe throwing and the family-friendly hike, a ton of fun. And I spent my Sunday at the Free State Bitcoin Digital Asset Conference, where I got to give 30 minutes of remarks about the Free State Project and what we're doing, and hear from a lot of great speakers about cutting-edge topics around blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. New Hampshire is the granite cradle of crypto. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's true. We have so many innovators here who have led the charge in pioneering this new industry to challenge the central bankers. And thank you to all who came out. I think there was about 150 there. And at other events, it was great to see folks, not just from here in New Hampshire, but coming and visiting. I know I spoke with a great couple at apple picking who were up from New Jersey and seriously thinking about making the move and joining us here. So if they're watching, it was great talking with you. We certainly hope that you do. If you decide to make the move, let us know. And we are happy to help you plan, prepare, and get your way up here. So thank you to all who came out to Fall Fest. And I do want to say thank you to Independence Realty Group, which put on all of the events for this, except for FSB DAC. That was its own thing. And thank you to Bruce and Carol Ann Fenton for executing a great Bitcoin conference. Now, the next big event that you will definitely want to check out and join us for, especially if you are someone who is interested in political activism, having a direct impact on your state legislature or your local town government, or, not just, complaining about issues, but actually making liberty win in these bodies. We have this November 8th in Concord, New Hampshire, our Free State Political Leadership Workshop. And this is being put on, we're hosting it, but it's being instructed by one of my friends at the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership. Look, these are the folks who are really we're connected to the Ron Paul movement in 2008 and 2012. And this particular activism training is what taught me how to be politically effective. How did I pass constitutional carry in the state of Maine during my first term in the Maine Senate? It was the skills I learned here. And not to brag, Maine is still the only state in America. Constitutional carry is like everywhere now. It's a majority of states, but Maine was one of the first. New Hampshire was not long after, but Maine was one of the first. And it's the only state that it ever got passed through a Democrat-controlled legislative chamber. How did I do it? I learned the principles at this training. I learned that we can hope for all the right people who believe all the right things to get elected and do the right thing because it's in their heart of hearts. But we're going to be waiting a long time for that. Even in New Hampshire, where we have about a quarter of the legislature is people who are there for the right reasons. But even here, you can't depend only on that. You got to know how to shape the political environment around the wrong people to make it politically expedient for them to do the right thing. That's how you advance liberty in the legislature. So I want you, if you want to come be an effective political activist, whether you're already here in New Hampshire, or maybe you're in Maine or Vermont or Massachusetts, and you want to take these lessons back home with you, then come on out and join us November 8th. This is the last week for the early bird tickets, so you're going to want to act now to get your ticket before prices go up. You can find that on the front page of fsp.org, or you can go right to fsp.org/FACL. That's FACL. I hope to see you there. It's going to be a great one. All right. Other notes I want to mention: if you aren't subscribed to the Free State Project newsletter, you are definitely missing out. So go to fsp.org and sign up. I write this newsletter every single week with some support from my team. And, anyway, it's great, compelling content. And that's how you're going to stay in the know on what's going on. And while you're there, if you want to take the extra step to support our year-round mission as we work to promote to the Liberty diaspora so they learn about what's going on here, we outreach to people so we can connect with them and communicate. We put on events and invite them to come visit so that people will be welcomed to move and come here and engage and build the Free State. You see how that works? That's our 5-stage pipeline of getting people from out there in the world here in New Hampshire building the Free State. If you want to support that year-round mission, then I could really use your help. We're trying to get to 300 Porcupine patrons by the end of the year. Last I checked, I think we're approaching 220. And if you aren't a Porcupine patron, I'll tell you, it's easy to do. It's very low cost. We're talking $100 a year, $10 a month, and you get all kinds of perks. You get, first of all, you get this really awesome Porcupine patron lapel pin, which is a great status symbol when you're in the Free State. Everyone will know that you are someone who's really contributing and making a difference. So that's cool. You get access to our patron exclusive Signal group, where we're always bantering about I'm taking ideas for podcast guests. We're bantering about different strategies to try to advance freedom. It's a great group to be in. And and there's also perks when you come to Free State Project events like PorcFest and Liberty Forum. So become a Porcupine patron, fsp.org/give. $100 a year is the lowest level. You get all kinds of perks, and the perks scale up from there. If you're feeling more generous, just remember, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. That means that your donation is tax deductible. So I'd love to count you in. Help us get to 300. All right. That's all the business out of the way. I want to welcome to the show our guest for today. His name is Ian Underwood. Let me tell you about Ian. He is the author of 17 books. I've got a few of them right here. What ones do I have? This one is The Libertarian Case for Public Schools. You know, he's got a lot of thoughts on public schools. I did flip through this a bit. I think it's a little tongue-in-cheek, which I appreciate. How the 14th Amendment ate the first 10. You know, it's imagine that has a lot to do with the, what do they call it? The incorporation doctrine, where basically they took away, they basically said the Bill of Rights applies to everything, to all the states, which kind of just meant that the national government has all the power. Doesn't quite work like you hope it would work. And the lie behind licensing. So he's like a Renaissance man, all these different topics. He's got a book on it. He's also the mover number 221. So one of the earliest movers for the Free State Project. He lives off the grid, which is pretty cool. And he's also part owner of Bardo Farm, which is a great community hub. I know they host a lot of the potluck, new mover potlucks for their area there. I've been up a few times. And anyway, I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about. So let's welcome to the program, Ian Underwood.
Hi, Eric. Nice to be here.
I'm so glad to be here. Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to have you here, Ian. It's been this should have happened sooner. So I really appreciate. I was in the patron chat looking for guest recommendations, and of course, your wife is a Porcupine patron, and she said you haven't had Ian on yet. I'm like, duh, we need to get Ian on. So, Ian, you're kind of like you're kind of like a mainstay in the Free State movement, and you've been at this for a long time. I guess let's get started. Like, you want to tell people your mover story, why you decided to come be a part of this, and what's it been like being in New Hampshire all this time?
Our mover story is that we have these friends, Neil and Emily Smith, who run Bardo Farm. We help them, but we all own it together. And they, the four of us were looking to go on an adventure, and we came up to New Hampshire. We went to Vermont first because Emily's from Vermont, and we just quickly realized that the entire situation there was anti-development, and we could not survive in that place. So we started looking in New Hampshire. We found a place that was 210 acres off the grid. We went home, we thought about it, and we pulled the trigger and just said, we have to do this. The great thing about the farm is we're between Newport and Hanover. So and actually Claremont's close. So we can get anything we want, but when you're actually on the property, it feels like you're kind of at the edge of the world, which is what we were looking for. So we came up, and our first thought was, we're all interested in education, but we didn't want to start a school, because as soon as you put the word school on anything, you get a lot of paperwork, you get a lot of regulations. And so our original idea was we would have, and this is where the name Bardo comes from. It's Tibetan for between lives. And so our original idea was we would find people who, in some sense had been climbing a ladder that was against the wrong wall, and realized this isn't what I want to be doing, and I would like to start over. And the idea was they would come to Bardo, they would help maintain the property, essentially be interns while they figured out what it was that they should be doing. So that's how we got started. It quickly turned into a farm, a real farm, with Neil and Emily raising pigs. And so that's, that has been sort of the basis of everything. And I, at some point, started writing books because I think I was mostly apolitical. I mean, apart from just wanting to be free. And then my friend, JJ Valera, dragged me down to the State House one day, and I gave a short testimony and was surprised at how many people came up to me and said, I've never heard anybody say anything like that. And all I said really was, to condense it to one sentence, if the legislature is going to ignore the words of the state constitution, then why shouldn't the people ignore the words of the legislature? right? Which I thought was a fair question, but it just shocked people, and they're like, what? So, and I started writing and giving talks. And so that's actually, yes, I started in the other order. So what I do is I give talks. People are like, well, we'd like to know more about this. Or sometimes Emily Smith will just say, come down to the Quill and talk about whatever you feel like. So I'll put together something. I'll go down, I'll give a talk, we'll record it, we'll get Q&A, and then basically that becomes the book. So the nice thing about the books, it's sort of intimidating to think, oh my God, there's more books to read. But I don't know if you showed this, but the books are
pretty short.
Yeah, they're
easy to flip
short.
through.
It's one idea per page. It's very kind of a children's books for adults. So the ideas are actually serious and substantial and deep, but the presentation is very light. And my goal is, as you're reading, to not even be aware that you're reading. It just feels like I'm talking to you. So that's, we're off the grid because the property we bought was off the grid, and now Jody and I live a mile up the road, even farther off the grid. That's been just a wonderful experience. Highly recommended, partly because you are insulated from, living in Maine and New Hampshire, how often the power goes out in the winter, right? Mm-hmm. Big storm, trees fall, telephone poles fall, and often we don't even notice it until we actually, go down the road and go, oh, look at that. Everybody else has power out. It also, one of the really cool things about living off the grid is how much more you have to pay attention to what's going on. You don't just set the thermostat to 70 and, just assume that everything's going to work. You really have to pay attention to the weather. You have to, in our case, we use solar energy to charge batteries. So we constantly have to be aware of what's the sun doing? How long has it been since we've seen it? How are the batteries doing? How much water have we brought into the house? So it actually, it makes you more aware. It makes you more awake. So, I know that not everybody can do it. If you move to Manchester, you can't do it. But if you get a chance to do it, even for a little while, I highly recommend it. And it's one of the great things about New Hampshire is that there is still land where you can get 5 acres, right? And put up a house and be surrounded by woods so that nobody knows you're there. Clear an acre, put up solar panels, drill a well, and you have your own little resort.
Yeah. And before you know it, you'll even be able to put in your own modular nuclear reactor, one day where.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we're all looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I know I am.
Yeah. It's exciting times when you live in a state where innovation is allowed.
It is, or at least, allowed. It's not, even if it's not allowed, people don't pursue it very much. I mean, one of the nice things about New Hampshire too is, like we moved into a town and there was, there are obviously zoning laws. There's a master plan. The master plan is being updated like 25 years too late because nobody ever looks at it. Nobody really looks at the zoning. It's basically, mind your own business. You mind your business, we'll mind our business, and we'll just be fine. So that is the live free or die attitude that you find, and that is the great thing why this is such an ideal spot for the Free State Project, because you're moving into a place where so many people are already so receptive to that idea. You just want to be a good neighbor, which is how we, people are like, oh, you're those Free Staters, and we're like, basically we're saying be good neighbors, take care of your own problems, ask your friends for help, and then only as a last resort think about using the government. So which part of that are you actually scared of or upset about? But yeah, it's when I was younger, I think if I'd made a list of all the states that I would end up living in, I think New Hampshire would have been in the bottom 5, and now I almost can't imagine living anywhere else. It's awesome.
As you mentioned that, I'm reminded of a recent op-ed that was published by one of our critics, which I responded to in with my own op-ed, but I thought it was humorous. She said these free staters, after she called us invasive weeds, which is funny because she was from Minnesota.
Right.
She's been here,
Yes.
she's been here. The Free State Project has been here longer than she has, I will
Yeah.
say. But she said, they have this strategy of convincing people that they're good neighbors.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I guess you convince them that by being a good neighbor.
By
like maybe we just
being a good
genuinely are
neighbor.
good people, and
Yeah.
we don't bother people. We just want to live our lives and help when a helping hand is needed.
Yeah. Yeah. It is funny. Both of those things that you hear people who are from Massachusetts or Minnesota, wherever they're from, come in and say, "Oh, I want this is my state, and I want it to be as progressive. I want it to be as much like Massachusetts as we can be, or as much like the place I left as we can be." And it's just like, well, you could just go back. And that, some people say, yes, free staters are coming here and trying to take over. And it's like, no, we're actually coming here because it's already very close to what we're looking for. It just, in some sense, we're here to help the people who it's gotten away from, right? Who did want to just be left alone and make their own decisions and raise their own kids. And suddenly there's this giant government infrastructure in place. And a lot of them are looking around going, how did this happen? So in that sense, we're not here from the government. We're not from the government, but we are here to help.
Yeah. Well, I know that you've been one of your big passions that you've been working on, especially lately, has been education and and alternatives to, I guess, the traditional governmental models. What would you like to say about that?
So I am, over the last several years, actually doing talks, doing writing. I am on the third book of essentially a trilogy, something that turned out to be a trilogy. And I didn't realize it. And the first of those books is called Rethinking Fairness in Education. And so what spurred that is there is a group traveling all around the state. It's the Education Fairness Funding Project or something, words to that effect. And what they have managed to do is take the word fairness and make it exclusively about money. How much is getting spent, who it's being taken from, who it's being given to, what tax rates are being charged, and so on. And so I'm trying to make a fairly old school case that it actually has nothing to do with that. That if fairness is going to be about anything with education, it should be about every kid learning the same thing, right? And and there are some things that follow from that. If every kid's going to learn the same thing, then you're actually sort of setting a ceiling rather than a floor. You're saying, look, kids will learn to read and write and be numerate and be rational, and every kid will get that education. And then what you've done is prepare them to go from there in whatever direction they want. But rather than saying we're going to have a bunch of kids who get essentially no education and a bunch of other kids over here who get way more than any taxpayer should be paying for. So that book is about reclaiming that word fairness. The second book is called Rethinking Funding in Education. And this is something that, sometimes you have an idea, I'm sure you know this, where you finally get the idea and you're thinking like, how did that take so long? Why didn't I know this 10 years ago? And in this case, the idea is very simple. It's that we ask the question, what's wrong? What are we doing wrong in schools? And I'm a big fan of Charles Kettering's saying that a problem well posed is a problem half solved. And so I'm trying to get people to ask a different question. Rather than saying, what are we doing wrong in schools? I want them to ask, what are we doing right everywhere else? And the short answer is, what we do right everywhere else is this. When we want something, we very clearly specify what it is in great detail often. Then we get the thing, and then we pay for it in that order. that order is actually crucial. And it is so common. And then, of course, if something goes wrong, it gets fixed. And that model of things, which I just call the standard model of commerce, I mean, it's so pervasive, it's so common, it's so normal that it's like fish in water, right? You don't notice it until somehow something goes wrong. When suddenly somebody won't honor a warranty, or somebody just says, yeah, tough luck, and you're like, wait, that isn't how it's supposed to work. And so everywhere in society, that's how we do things. We get goods that way, we get services that way. We get the thing, then we pay for it, which is the opposite of what we do in school, where we do what I call pay and pray. We give the school a bunch of money up front. We don't actually say what it is they're supposed to do in any level of detail. So later, when they don't do it, we really have no basis for arguing. And then we hope for the best. And if it doesn't work, we try it again next year.
We'll just throw more money at it.
Yeah, would you like to try again? It's like one of the claw things. It's like, I didn't get the thing. I'll put more money in, right? And I'll just keep trying, and you're never going to get it. So I'm actually trying to get legislators, state reps, to think about, and I've got several interested, thinking about how to introduce a bill that would say schools will get paid not for seat time, not for good intentions, not even for instruction. They will get paid when students learn, right? Which, when you think about it, seems obvious, because, like I said, it is how it works everywhere else. So these are two fairly, they're simple ideas, but they're unusual ideas. So the third one, which I'm almost done with, is actually based on a talk I gave around the state to several Republican groups. And it will be called Rethinking Fun in Education. And the idea has to do with this, that right now, there's this sort of umbrella under the name school. And if you can stuff something under that umbrella, right? Sports, drama, music, therapy, meals. If you can stuff something under that umbrella, then it gets subsidized forever, which is a screaming deal for like parents. So one of the things that I'm trying to get, again, mostly legislators to look at, is to take an opportunity, and an opportunity presented itself recently where the CDC put forward I don't know what the CDC can really do. It was a recommendation, it was model legislation to try to make schools, in addition to everything else that they're doing or really not doing, to make them into medical clinics, right? That, kids are in school, so we might as well give them health care there. And it's the kind of thing where, Republicans and libertarians should just pounce on that like a cat on a mouse and just kill it. And what I'm suggesting is that you don't kill it. You be more like the cat who plays with the mouse, because it lets you ask this question. This clearly doesn't belong in schools. But what else are we doing in schools that doesn't belong in schools? What are some of the other things under that umbrella that maybe we should be thinking, not just not putting this in, but taking those out? And, the punchline of the book is basically that you can look at what our state constitution says, and you can look at what our state Supreme Court has said, and you come to this conclusion that schools, if they're going to do anything, should deal with what's necessary. And if something's necessary, then it better be mandatory. And if something's not mandatory, it doesn't belong in school. So where does it belong? Currently, what happens if you try to say schools shouldn't do this or schools shouldn't do that, everybody jumps on you. It's like, oh my God, you hate education, you hate kids, right? And I'm just suggesting, no, those are all fine things and people should do them. They just shouldn't do them in schools. They should do them in community centers. And so again, I'm hoping to find, enterprising legislators to try to help tease that out. And, with some fairly simple rules, basically saying, like, if not a subject, but if some knowledge or learning is not taught in every school, then nobody can be taxed to pay for it, which would, shrink the curriculum down to what's necessary. So those are the 3 books. And I think that if you took those 3 ideas seriously, right, that fairness is about learning, not about money, that we should pay for things in schools the same way we pay for them everywhere else. And third, that we should use schools for school things and use community centers and hospitals and welfare offices and whatever for everything else. I actually think you could have a reasonable public school system. It wouldn't be ideal. And there are still some ways that I would want to change it. But if you have those 3 things, I think you actually can, you have some traction. And if you don't have any one of those things, then you are screwed. And we have none of them. So we are screwed. Yeah. And this is why. So that's what I've been writing and thinking about lately. Trying to get these 3 ideas out there to where, people are actually starting to think of them as normal. And oddly enough, you mentioned constitutional carry. Because one of the things I will say in talks all the time is, here's this idea, and I know what you're thinking. This can't happen, right? This will never happen. And then I say, okay, here's the counterexample, constitutional carry, right? When I was a kid, the idea that you'd just be able to put on a gun and walk around and not ask permission, that was insane. And now it's the law in more than half the states. How did that happen, right? And it happened partly because people got very smart about political activism, but partly because it just kept getting introduced. So I think you just said that you got it through the first time it was introduced in Maine?
No, it was in my first term. There'd been a build up to it. Mostly the cycle before, when I was an outside activist working on it.
Okay.
And, we had a big push, but it was basically the second time there was a big push around it.
Yeah.
We got it done.
Right. And so that's sort of the point I want people to see, is that you do have to push, and you have to bring it back and bring it back and bring it back until, what at first seems like this nutty idea, after a while, people sort of end up on the other side saying, well, why shouldn't we be doing that? I want people running around asking, why should we pay for stuff that we're not getting? Why should we equate money with fairness when what we really want is for the kids to learn? Those kinds of questions. And I think once you get people asking those questions that way, as Kettering said, then your problem is half solved, because now the problem becomes, well, how could we pay for learning after it occurs? How could we set up a school system so that kids learn until they're ready to leave, and then they leave, and that's very different from what we're doing now.
Now, whether on education policy or any other aspect you care to talk about, as you've been in New Hampshire, I mean, what have you seen as like the trajectory of, I guess, the broader Free State movement and its impact on these areas that are of importance to you? Well,
I mean, you've seen, I think since I've been here, homeschooling has gotten much easier. I think it was never as hard as it's been in other states like California, right, where it basically the government treats it like a roach that it has to stamp out. But we did, since I've been here, we've had people who have reduced the requirements for reporting, for testing, to the point where you just legally you have to report, yes, I'm going to homeschool my kid, although nothing seems to happen if you don't. And you're supposed to, take tests and keep portfolios, whatever, but you don't actually have to show them to anybody. So homeschooling has, that's one of the places where I think, if not the Free State Project itself, that attitude has sort of welled up and pushed in that direction. So we're in this, where we live, there's just a lot of parents who homeschool their kids and are, perfectly happy doing it, and the kids are thriving. And this is one of the things my wife Jody is, has started this organization called EdOpt to just inform parents about all the other options that you have, so that, the things like micro schools, homeschooling is always at the top of the list. Things like, learning centers, charter schools even, where people don't realize, they don't know some of them don't know that charter schools exist. The ones who do think you have to pay to go to them. So there's just a lot of ignorance. And I think one of the things about the Free State ethos is that you are always trying to get people to realize, yes, you don't need to just go down the same path as everybody else. So I think that, and so that would spill over to other things. The gun laws have relaxed. They weren't terrible to begin with, but we have constitutional carry now. Health, there's always a battle. I think health freedom has brought a lot of people here, partly because they saw, that at least people were trying, to own their own bodies.
Yeah. I know the COVID moment was a big wake-up call for a lot of people, and
Yes.
a lot of movers to New Hampshire.
Yes.
And I always thought it was interesting because on the one hand, it didn't seem to me like Governor Sununu was at the top of the pack when it came to COVID policy. He wasn't Ron DeSantis on the issue, but it seemed to me like the appeal was, I mean, I'm not saying he was Janet Mills either. Like maybe he wasn't as enthusiastic a tyrant as some of the others, but it did seem to me like the real the real value here was the fact that with the strong communities that were present of Free State communities, it became just very easy to ignore these mandates. Whereas in Maine, I think of my parents who were there, and they thought it was all BS, but all of their neighbors, all of their friends thought, like, you're going outside without a mask? Like, are you like, you're a plague spreader? Like, the amount of shame that you would get from your community for just being a free person, and worst case scenario, like actually getting snitched on to the state, with so many of these states that open snitch lines on people. It seemed like here in New Hampshire, if you were in the Free State community, you just had a built-in network of people that you just all disregarded altogether.
Yeah, we did, and we actually called it our quarantine. It was just our natural group, and we still got together, and we would, have dinner and have parties and have potlucks and do whatever weekly. So it was, that was wonderful to have that. And every once in a while, I think, what if I'd lived in like Chicago or something, or New York, or even California? I might have, lost my mind. But it was actually fairly easy here. You would have to deal with businesses. That was sort of the hardest thing. Sununu was interesting because when he first, when he issued his first sort of lockdown order, I read it and I wrote about this. It's like, basically what he said was, you have to stay home unless you have a good reason not to. Which is like, okay, I can live with that because I get to decide whether I have a good reason or not, So there was no idea that you'd be arrested or harassed or whatever. It's just like, don't do this. To me, it was much more, that he was willing to start dividing, businesses into the necessary and
essential
and inessential. Which is just like, what, are you kidding me? That actually led to that book on licensing. It was just like that. I thought was the lesson of COVID, that the reason all that could happen was because all the leverage they had was, go along or we'll take away your license, and then you can't do anything, right? So, in that sense, that if it turns out to have been a learning moment, which I'm starting to fear that it wasn't, that would be a good thing.
Why do you think it wasn't? It is bizarre to see that it seems like for so many people who were on the absolute wrong side of this question, there's just a desire to just sweep it all under the rug and act like it's just like a period of history where, it's just like, we went from like 2019 and then suddenly we were in like 2022. It's almost like we want to forget about those years. Maybe
I think people see it as an anomaly. It's just like, okay, that wasn't, whatever happened, but you want to see it. They want to see it as an anomaly without actually admitting that there was a problem, right? And not actually admitting that they were wrong. It's like, if we just wipe it out, then I don't have to be wrong about trying to shut people down and lock them in their homes and keep kids out of school and whatever. For me, just looking back at that, the thing that really got to me was when they started shutting down churches and people just went along with it. I was just floored by that. I was just like, okay, You know, for better or worse, Americans love their religion. And for them to just say, oh, okay, I have to stay home. Okay. Yeah, that I would never, I would have put serious money on that not happening. And I'm glad I didn't, because I would have lost. But I think, yeah, there is this sort of, and you see this now where people just, it's like nobody wants to talk about it, you know, in the national level, at least. Nobody really wants to admit that anything happened. They're still telling people, oh yeah, you should be taking your boosters, even though the statistics are showing that, like, you know, 10% of healthcare professionals are doing it. There's a huge disconnect there. And I think, you know, this is probably just cognitive dissonance. You don't want to have to face that you could have been that wrong about something, because then the next time something happens, then what? You'll have to, well, maybe I'm wrong about this, you know, and people can't handle that. I think that's a very difficult thing just for humans in general to handle. Being wrong, being so wrong about something.
I remember, like, when I try to think of the moment in my life where I had to confront that was very difficult, was like the war in Iraq, right? You know, we were all, you know, it was very easy to just like follow the experts, right? Everyone on Fox News and CNN and MSN, you know, all these folks at the time, there were Hillary Clinton and everyone else says, this is what we got to do. And then you have to reconcile with the fact that, like, you supported like mass murder. You know, it's most people want to look away from that conclusion and not learn any lesson from it. So I think it's why it took like 10 years for people to really come to terms with what happened. And I wonder if hopefully at some point we will come to terms. People will come to terms. Maybe it will take 10 years for people to come to terms with what happened during COVID. But at some point, I just hope that the history books aren't written in such a way that says, you know, we had these great experts in charge and things didn't go well because of these stupid rubes who wouldn't follow the science. Like,
oh, but even now what you hear is how many millions of lives were saved. So I think the people writing the history books that end up in the schools, as opposed to the ones that are just written for popular consumption, will actually present it as a success. That's my prediction, that they will just say, this was, you know, one of the shining moments in the history of humanity where everybody put down their differences and came together and saved the human race, you know, by jabbing themselves with these needles. That's what I actually think is going to be reported. That will be the history as it's written. I think there's an interesting linguistic thing just which relates to this, which is, I think part of what's going on is when the thing is happening, whether it's invading Iraq or supporting Ukraine or, you know, forcing people to get vaccinations, at that moment, you can be part of we, right? We are doing this. We must do this. And so you're part of a, you know, this crowd.
So like diffused accountability. Like, I'm not really responsible for it because I'm just doing what everyone else is telling me.
Right. But later it can be, well, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
They did it. So now I'm, you know, so just the use of pronouns. I mean, people get very picky about pronouns, but I mean, these pronouns actually matter, whether you say we're doing it or I'm doing it or some of us are doing it or those people are doing it, and how you describe it. I think it matters. It matters for accuracy, but I also think it matters in that people can use these kind of vaguenesses to draw comfort from it and just say, okay, that wasn't me. I wouldn't have gone that far, but, you know, or I didn't know better because that's what the expert said. So, but yeah, I don't think a lot of the people who were on the shutdown side see it as a failure. I think they see it as a success. So that's going to be a tough battle to get those people to ever come around. I don't know that they ever will.
Yeah. Well, I guess we got to make sure that it's not in the government schools that people are learning the history.
Well, yeah. I mean, and this is actually an interesting topic that comes up, and I've had a little success with this where, you know, people are like, we have to teach more history and civics in schools. And I'm like, really? Okay. You want Andrew Volinsky teaching the New Hampshire state constitution? You know, do you want, you know, who do you, which history do you want taught? 1776 or 1619, right? It's so, and you can actually get people to sometimes see, well, yeah, well, we have to control that. And it's like, well, you've totally lost control of it. So you have to assume that people
Yeah.
who hate you are going to be teaching civics and history to your kids. But here's the good news. If you teach your kids to read, they can read the civics and
Yeah.
history, right? It's not like it's written in Danish.
Yeah.
It's there. It's been there for hundreds of years, and it's all available for them if they can read.
I've never truly understood, once I kind of like stepped outside the narrative and kind of saw it for what it was. Like, I never really understood why it would be like the conservative limited government position to want the government schools to be responsible for teaching the history of the government. Right? It seems like there's a little bias there, right? I remember I think it was Tom Woods who like said it in such a way that it just like blew my mind. He said, like, imagine if the schools were run by Walmart and every day the kids got up and pledged allegiance to the Walmart, and on the walls, you know, all around the classroom, there's the pictures of every past CEO of Walmart, and we're told all the stories about how, well, this one could never tell a lie. This one was so honest, and everything is framed through the narrative about how Walmart is at the vanguard of every great thing that ever happened in history. Like, when you frame it like that, it seems like, yeah, that seems like propaganda. That doesn't seem like that doesn't seem like the institution you would want to trust to teach this kind of history.
But I think that's, so this is one of the, you know, frequently when I hear Republicans complaining or conservatives complaining about progressives, and what I always want to say to them is, you know, like, you started it. You set up the propaganda mills, and now you're upset because you've lost control of them, right? Yeah. Because they were doing exactly what you're saying. Abe Lincoln, the most honest guy, and all the stuff, all the myths, of this, they set that up, right? And then somebody else got the keys, and now they're like, no, we have to stop this. But it's like they're just playing the game that you started. And so this is where, you know, you hope that one of the lessons I would like to see come away from this would be that conservatives and Republicans and libertarians would finally get the message that, like, what we want is not to control government and use it for our agenda. We want to make sure nobody can use it for any agenda, right? It's just there to let people decide how they're going to live their lives and sort of stay out of each other's business. I don't know. Do you think they'll ever get that message?
One hopes, but it seems like whatever Republicans get in power, maybe less so in New Hampshire, because the liberty movement has become so infused within the legislature. But certainly on the national level, you hear all this great rhetoric, you know, whenever they're out of power, and then the moment that they're in, it's great. How can we build up the machinery even more now that we're in charge to use it for our purposes? And thankfully, we will never lose an election ever again. Right? We will never surrender this machinery to our opponents ever again. We can count on perpetual control of it all.
Yeah.
And of course, inevitably the pendulum always swings, and then they're out of power, and suddenly they believe in the Constitution again.
Yes. Yeah. So that's you know, one of my great sources of frustration. I mean, I will say this: during COVID, I was, apart from the church thing, what startled me was how many libertarians suddenly we're like, no, we must wear masks, we must have mandates, we must close things down. And I was just like, who are you?
Yeah.
That was a sort of a second. So the church thing was just, it just blew my mind. But the how many libertarians suddenly found that fear was more motivating to them than liberty, that just kind of crushed my soul. So maybe nobody will ever get it, you know, and maybe this is just, you're just along for the ride and you watch what's going to happen. And, you know, so you're the passenger on the train and you see, the bridge is out up there. And
that's why we got to concentrate the liberty people in one place, so that we're not just all perpetually surrounded by the people who will never get it.
Yeah. And, you know, and one of the things that you find in New Hampshire among liberty oriented people is this, they're training for, if not self-sufficiency, then resiliency, right? Which is more of an achievable goal, that if there are disruptions, I will have a food supply. I don't have 6 years of food, but I have a few months. I have gold and silver. I have things I can trade. I have skills I can use to ride out whatever happens, if there's some kind of shakeout. There's a lot of interest in that. I mean, at least the people that I know, and it's one of the things that makes them fun to know. You always have stuff to talk about. Growing things, fixing things, harvesting things, killing things, cooking things. You never run out of when that's your focus, is sort of a DIY life. It's just fun and interesting. And I will say this, the people I am most jealous of in the whole world are the kids who are grown up in that, who grow up and they see their parents fixing things. They see their parents building things. They see their parents growing things, apart from any theoretical considerations about liberty, just to be growing up with that, which is something I completely grew up without. You take everything to, your car's not working, okay, take it to the garage, they'll fix it. So yeah, I'm thrilled. I have some trepidation about the world that they're growing up in, and how much just especially with AI and increased surveillance and just more and more choke points on everything. So on that side, I'm a little afraid for them, but just the experience that they're having in this state at this moment is phenomenal. Another reason to move here, so your kids will grow up like that.
Well, Ian, we're coming to the end of the hour. Any final thoughts you want to share with folks before we wrap up?
Well, my wife will kill me if I don't. Once again, plug Bare Minimum Books, because I don't like to talk about it. I like to write the books. She likes to
ask people to
market
subscribe
them
so they can know when your new book comes out.
Oh, right. Apparently, she has set up you can subscribe at the website, bareminimumbooks.com, and then you'll find out when a new book comes out, because they tend to come out in sporadically, like in bunches. Like I won't do anything for a long time because I'm chopping wood or, harvesting pigs or whatever. And then suddenly, boom, here's 5 books. But, I would encourage people to find out about Bardo Farm. Happy animals taste better. Those guys they're just amazing farmers. So they raise pork, they raise beef. Those are the main things.
I know I've got some pork of theirs sitting in my freezer. I'm waiting for a good opportunity.
Yeah, we just had a pig roast for Jody's Adopt. So I would also say parents who are thinking about, who realize that the ship is sinking and are looking for lifeboats, education options, adopt.com or adopt, edopt.org is a resource that's great and getting better every day. So those are the things I would plug.
All right. Well, Ian, thank you so much for being a Free State pioneer, one of the first. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, that's the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, of course, be sure to share the show, like, subscribe, comment, whatever makes sense on the platform that you are consuming this. I know we're on X and Facebook and Spotify and most of your favorite podcasting platforms. Of course, YouTube, we're there as well. Be sure to go to fsp.org, sign up for the weekly newsletter, become a patron, and come on out to our November 8th Free State Political Leadership Workshop. You can find out all about that on the front page of fsp.org, or go right to fsp.org/FACL, FACL, and you'll be able to sign up directly there. Early bird tickets are running out this week. So if you want to act fast, November 8th, again, if you want to be politically effective, whether you're in New Hampshire or anywhere, these are the skills to win. So, and that's what we're about. We're not here to just have a social club where we just sit around and talk about liberty. We want to build it. And this is one way to be equipped to do so. I want to say thank you to our producer, Renita, for all the work she does to make this show look so fantastic. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.